I must play every game I get an ad for immediately. I have not experienced a roller coaster of emotion as much as playing this gacha game ever in my life. I was so excited to play an anime based on Shield Hero, as even though I haven't watched it myself, I heard it was an amazing anime. This game, though, was one of the worst games I've ever had the opportunity to play. It was a relatively new game being released about a week ago from recording, but had a low rating of 3.2 stars on Google Play. Let's start with the good part of the game. They had some amazing cutscene animations, which I assume were taken straight from the anime. They also had really good character portraits. They were super well made in a more hand-drawn anime art style. In this story, all the characters had Japanese voice acting that was sometimes a bit lower quality, but for a gacha game, really good. Again, I'm not sure if they took it straight from the anime or not. Finally, the background in some of the scenes were also really detailed and had an amazing anime feel to it. But some were definitely taken straight from the anime, as some background pictures were blurry and super low quality, as if they just screenshotted them straight from Crunchyroll or something. Also, during the visual novel-esque part of the story, the 2D drawn characters did not mesh well at all with the background, which was kinda weird. The graphics for the actual gameplay itself was pretty disappointing. It was another 2D based game, but the animations for each character seemed kinda forced and weird. The game lacked those little animations for getting resources and in the UI, so each item just felt super flat and more like a picture. I'm not sure if it was due to the weird shadow or just how they coded the items into the game, but it just felt cheap and weird. When heroes used skills in the game, it was just a blast of light like a poorly done lens flare, with my entire screen turning a certain color. The actual in-game animations were bad. There was a good tutorial in the game. It explained everything that you had to know about the combat and how to recruit units and such. Some of the tutorials later on in the game had weird grammatical errors and word choice, but it still got the point across. Even with these errors, it's nice that they put a decent enough tutorial in, as that can't be taken for granted in gacha games. The combat mechanics were very similar to games like Summoner's War and Epic 7. In this game, it looked like each character had 2 skills and 1 passive, with each of them having their own unique kit based on their archetype. There were the standard buffs and debuffs in the game, like attack up and defense break. Additional mechanics were that some skills had cooldowns and some took energy. You would have a limited supply of energy that you could use in a team's turn, so you would have to decide what big skills to use even if they were off cooldown for each character. There was also an ult ability you could use that had strong effects. The combat mechanics were honestly pretty good and definitely in-depth enough to be competitive. If anyone has ever played Summoner's War or Epic 7, both these games solely based on the combat mechanics has a pretty competitive scene. This game was also more of a gacha style game, where you got to summon new heroes to use in your party. To put this nicely, this was probably the most blatant cash grab that I've ever played. It had all the pay-to-win things like battle passes, VIP, gacha pools, and discounted bundles. However, this game just pushed it to a degree that I've never seen before. There was like 5 different battle passes 1 week into release. The closest game I can think that is similar would be Eversoul, but even then, this game outpaced it by like 2 to 3 times. They even had a resource battle pass too, not just premium currency, which is the worst type. I have played gacha games for the past 10 years of my life, and I was even pretty shocked on how far they went with this one. The text on the daily login passes weren't even done correctly and looked awful. This is the main source of revenue and they couldn't be asked to format it correctly. The core type of game is very similar to E7 or Summoner's War. You have characters that can level up, get skills, and put gear on that has specific sets and stats. There is different content to do, like main story, which was pretty basic, infinite tower, PvP arena, and resource areas. There was also a pretty cool roguelike dungeon that you could clear every now and then. I didn't think this was as common in gacha games, but I've seen a lot of them more and more, which is amazing, as I love them. In E7, the main way to progress after leveling characters was to get better gear, and I assumed this game was similar. The main UI was actually pretty good. It was extremely cluttered, but unlike the rest of the game, it did look relatively well done. Some of the buttons had text that went past the edges, which was pretty annoying, but honestly, with this game, I can't even be too surprised. Now it's time for the final rating of the game. My system of rating for now is 10 points for graphics, 10 points for gameplay, 10 points for story, 10 points for progression, and finally 10 points for my personal opinion on if I will continue to play the game. In total, it'll be out of 50 points or normalized to 5 stars, which is the Google Play rating scale. Graphics were 2. The reason they got any points was because the portraits were really well drawn, also because they took animations and pictures from the anime, and I don't want to disrespect the people who actually put work into that. Everything else was just bad. The story had texts that overlapped on each other, the actual gameplay characters looked awful, and the animations were poor. They tried to turn the light effects on skills up to 1000% to hide this, but it just made it look worse. I'm honestly so disappointed because I love the anime art style and the portraits were pretty cool, but they were just poorly pasted on top of a blurry still taken from the anime, which is inexcusable. The gameplay actually wasn't bad, and I'd give it a 10 out of 10. Honestly, it was pretty basic like E7 or Summoners War gameplay, but had an additional layer that prevented everyone from just spamming the most powerful ability at the start, which I thought was pretty cool. It definitely is just a straight copy from these games, but those games had good gameplay, so can't really complain. It has the opportunity to be very competitive even in a PvP scenario. In addition, within the story, you can encounter shrines that gave a temporary buff for the area, which I liked, as that adds a bit more interaction and roguelike experience to the story episodes, which is cool. The downside is there's a skip button on most battles, so most battles were just skipped and 0 skill was required. The story I'll give a 6. Honestly, it was really good as it was simply taken from the anime. The 6 is because it was just so poorly put into the game. Some parts just seemed absolutely forced and janky. Many of the scenes did not flow or transition into the game at all. It just felt like it played 20 seconds from the anime randomly in between the gameplay. Bear with me here on this one, but you know when movies reveal an old-time favorite or like a classic motif? For example, in one of the newer James Bond movies when they revealed the classic car he drove, or the newer Star Wars movies when Harrison Ford stepped in, it felt like the game at every turn was trying to emulate the "wow, I remember that" feeling, but in the worst way possible. This level of fan service can be good if you like the anime, but they just did it so poorly and at the cost of good storytelling. They just randomly sprinkled in motifs from the anime instead of actually making it a good reveal. For progression, I'll have to rate it a 5. This was one of the most egregious cash grab games I've ever seen in my entire life. The pay to win factor automatically just bumps it down for me by that many points. Honestly, it looked cool with the gearing system and everything else seemed pretty standard, but you can't have like 5 different gameplay battle passes, a resource pass, and VIP systems and be a well-balanced game for the free-to-play player. It wasn't centered around the AFK style of resource getting, which is pretty cool, and I would assume the main way to progress later on is through grinding gear, as the game was based around E7 and Summoner's War. Overall, isolated, the progression isn't the worst, but just not amazing. And finally, do I like the game? For this, I'm kinda gonna cheat, but not really since there isn't an established rule against this. I'm gonna have to give it a negative 10. The reason for this is for the fans of Shield Hero anime, manga, or light novel. I personally haven't read or seen the anime, but if this game was based on an anime IP that I watched and liked, such as ReZero or something, I would have been furious. It is a literal cash grab game based on the IP of Shield Hero, completely inexcusable to release a game like this. If they have some sort of huge change in leadership and direction of the game, I might play it again, but that's just unlikely. In conclusion, the game was rated a 13 out of 50. If you're gonna take the animations from an anime, the voice acting from an anime, the pictures from an anime, the story from the anime, at least make the background pictures not 240p blurry and create good enough transitions in the game that doesn't make it completely wonky and weird. Also, make the subtitles correct, as that is the literal only thing that you're adding in. I honestly got mad playing this game, and I honestly think 13 out of 50 is a pretty lenient rating. I'll leave you guys with some clips from my initial impressions. If you want to watch the full video, I also released that on YouTube. Anyways, thanks a lot for watching, guys, and hopefully the next game is better. As your daily login. Look how cheap this is, though, right? It literally just looks like they typed this in and then just added in an icon. Normal games, what they would do, this icon would be lower, right? It wouldn't be on the same line as the text. And this picture wouldn't be covering the numbers. It's so cheap. Like, what? 600, 680 now, and there's no space there, and 480 coins will be sent within 30 days, and then why, yes. Like, come on, dude. You can put a little bit more effort into this. Okay, cool. So they have this battle pass too, which is 10 bucks, by the way. They have this story thing, which is just clearing. So this is another battle pass that costs $20. That's just from story clearing. So yeah, a lot of places have that. This is another one for different stages, right? For Alchemy Ruins, which is the Infinite Tower, another 20 bucks. And then Prison of Evil, another content. I don't think we unlocked this yet, but this thing, it costs $25. And on top of that, they have a journal, which is your monthly like Genshin resource pass stuff. It's 15 bucks. It just screams cash grab when you have this many opportunities to spend money. And in this case, opportunities is not a good thing. We also have VIP system. Like, dude, I can't condone this type of game, especially when the text is awful.